Warning, if I had any brain cells left in my head right now, I'd be telling you all about how this podcast is going to be full of spoilers and some shits and fucks.
Hi, and welcome back to Aim for the Head podcast. I am Julie.
And I'm Diana.
And we're going to be giving you a bonus episode today.
Bonus!
So we are going to talk about the second season of Better Call Saul. It's going to be kind of a loose episode for us because we did not structure it like we normally do. If you are joining us simply because you saw Better Call Saul, welcome. Welcome to Aim for the Head podcast.
Where we normally, our main sort of area of focus will be and has been Fear of the Walking Dead and The Walking Dead.
Yes.
Fear of the Walking Dead is in hiatus right now in between their A and B seasons. So Julie and I thought that rather than have a bunch of empty airspace, we would continue talking about some of the things that we love. And it was pretty easy to jump to such a popular other AMC show, you know. I mean, we loved Breaking Bad, and man, did we love when Better Call Saul came out.
Yeah, it was a fun little thing to hear about Better Call Saul. We got, you know, it takes place well before Breaking Bad, so we get these great backstories of Saul, Jimmy, and Mike. Mike was one of my favorite characters in Breaking Bad, so I was really excited to see.
I know.
Learn more about his backstory.
It's funny too because when they first started talking about doing this Better Call Saul prequel kind of thing, I wasn't as excited. Like, I thought that Saul Goodman was this great character on the show.
So animated,
right?
And fun,
and I thought it'd be, you know, interesting. And plus, Bob Odenkirk is just fantastic in that role. And I thought it'd be, you know, fun, and we wanted to try it out. But as soon as we started watching, and then it was clear that Mike was going to be a part of it, I was like,
God.
Okay, I'm sold. I'm here. I mean, and then obviously it became as great as it is.
Well, and I'll say too that this season, both seasons they've honestly, in a whole, been really great. I mean, good writing. Vince, oh my God.
I mean, the best writing. It's the best writers who wrote the best show, moving on to a show that's based just before the best show started. So, I mean, you can't fault the writing or the direction in any way. These actors.
But I had times during Breaking Bad where even though the show itself was so good, I would almost be reluctant to watch an episode because they'd maybe be in an area of this season that was a little bit slower, or Walt would be doing something that made me want to smack him.
Yeah,
things like that. So, and in this show, Jimmy does the same thing. Jimmy does things that make me want to smack him, and it slows down a little bit. So it's, you know, when I go to watch this show, I know I'm going to have to pay really close attention.
Yeah.
And I just need to be very present, which a lot of my other shows I watch are a little bit faster moving, so they're easier to stay so connected with.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, in the times where I'm like, not so much, I don't want to watch it, but it's getting really slow, and what's this episode going to bring? I would always make sure I tuned in again because I wanted to see what happened with Mike.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially if something was going on with Jimmy that was pissing me off, or I just wanted to like jump through my screen and shake him and be like, "What the fuck are you doing?"
Especially since like Jimmy's character has. He definitely has that problem where he just doesn't learn from his mistakes. He really just sort of makes those same mistakes over and over again, you know. And I don't think it's really like, you know, Chuck's big thing was that he's just not being held accountable for his actions. But, you know, you can argue that, you know, maybe he's always finds a way sort of out of whatever's going on. But he finds a way out, and he never really learns, you know. So he keeps part of this whole process for him becoming Saul Goodman, if you will, is got to be involved with him. I wonder if he'll eventually sort of own up to his mistakes that he's made.
Right. So, yeah, what we want to do in this episode is just kind of break down the season for you. We're not going to go in crazy detail. In the other podcasts, if you listen, you know that we break down the episode by scene, and we're not going to do that here. We're really just going to go through some of the things that we really liked about the season, maybe some of the scenes that really stood out to us or that were really important to us, and kind of go from there.
Hit the big stuff.
Yeah. So I'll say right now that Season 2 opened again with a flash forward or a present of Jimmy, #Saul, #Gene at Cinnabon doing his job, and he locks himself on accident in this trash room.
Oh, my God.
And you see that he is unwilling to open that exit door because it's an emergency exit, and he knows that the authorities are going to come.
I know, just that look on his face when he's got his hand over and it's like, police will come, emergency exit, alarm will sound, police will be notified. Right. You're like, oh, no.
And he can't do it. So he sits in that room and he just waits. And then he ends up writing SG was here. Saul Goodman was here.
Yeah, exactly.
And some guy walks in to throw his trash out, and he just pops up and walks out, doesn't say anything to the man, just leaves.
And if you think about it, think about that opening scene that they had for the season 1 and then this scene. He never speaks. We don't hear his voice at all. At least I don't think so.
No.
Maybe when they were wrapping up. But was it other employees? Because that's what it was. He was taking the trash out at the end of the night. He was closing up. Maybe other people were like, good night, Gene.
Right.
We'll see you later. Like, there was a little bit of conversation, but I don't think he said anything.
There isn't really any dialogue for him in these present scenes with him as Gene.
Oh, my God. Can you imagine going from that life of being Saul, where he was nothing but, like, he was, slick and never stopped talking.
Not just slick, but he was kind of the king of his own world, Mm-hmm. He made all of his own choices and did these kind of outrageous things and made a good amount of money.
Yeah, he sure did.
And he had bodyguards and people who followed him around, and he was important to certain people. He was important, and now he is just a nobody. He just works at a Cinnabon. Like, Walt fucked his life up.
Yeah. Good job,
Well, it wasn't
Walt.
just Walt. Jimmy also makes bad choices for himself.
Exactly.
So,
he could have said no to some of that stuff.
He could have. He decided to dig himself into that deeper.
Yeah.
So, but
great opening though.
Yeah, great opening, and we find out that Jimmy declines with Davis and Maine, and Kim doesn't understand why, and then pretty much right away, Jimmy ropes Kim into conning some guy.
Yeah, God, what a great scene that
is. It's like the first episode, right? And they con this guy. He's a stock trader, and they just get him to buy expensive drinks, really expensive drinks.
Yeah,
and food and
before they even started the con, they had a side conversation where they were talking about how shots of this thing are X amount of dollars or whatever, and then so you already have that pre-information, and as soon as they're running this con, they're like, "Oh, you should have this. It's so delicious.
Have you ever tried this shot? It's amazing."
And then of course they have it, and it's really good. So this guy is of course like, "Oh, I've got to keep grease the works and keep it going," and and you're like, "Oh shit, this is gonna be such a big bill. It's awesome."
But that really that did something to Kim. It kind of sparked something there, and she goes home with Jimmy, and they kind of they've always had a weird relationship. Like in the first season, they never really told us.
You knew there was a bond, a closeness, but there's no details.
There's no details there on if they had tried to date. Obviously we know that Jimmy has this thing for Kim.
Yeah.
It's there, but you don't really see it returned by Kim. The way, but you can see that she has this, she cares for him.
Yeah.
But you just don't see that next level there.
No.
Until this episode.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, go Jimmy. Yeah, I got the girl.
Yeah, he totally did.
In a
right
weird
off the bat.
way.
Yeah, exactly. But also, since we're sort of just going to group together like some of our highlights of the season, it's not the only time that the con happens. Then there's later in another episode where Kim is just upset over
she doesn't want to be at HHM anymore.
Yeah, she's been really upset.
And she's been given another job offer elsewhere, and she doesn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So she goes and it wasn't intentional. She didn't go there to set up a con.
Yeah.
But she kind of falls into one and calls Jimmy to join her.
Yeah. And it's just so funny how it just sort of fell into it. She literally just calls him and is like, I've got a good one on the wire, or on the hook. Come and find me. And he does. And it's just, he just falls right into it. And we discussed while the season was going on, when these two moments happen, is really just only those two that we see Kim run. The one where he drags her into it, and then the one where she goes willingly.
Yep.
Very interesting. Then we talk about the more she did these things, it made you wonder, like, what Kim's backstory is.
Yeah.
So,
I'm very interested to see more about Kim.
Yeah, so here's hoping.
Yeah.
I would say, too, so there was all of that stuff, but so Kim's relationship with Jimmy is definitely a central focus of the, just their closeness. Not so much that they're sort of dating, but their closeness,
their
as
bond that
friends,
they have.
their bond that they have is definitely central to a lot of the plot points for this season.
Well,
And next to it, of course, are all of these moments with Jimmy trying to prove himself to Chuck.
Yes.
And that's just an ongoing thing where, Chuck always thinks the worst of him.
Yep.
The big thing that happens is this large claim that they're going to be able to put together the suit that they're going to do for the old folks home.
For the old folks home.
Yeah, for the old folks home. Sandpiper.
I knew it was Piper.
Yeah,
I was like, what?
Something Piper. Yeah, Pied Piper. Oh, wrong show.
Piper?
Yeah. So Jimmy sort of finds that, brings it to them. That's how that
he does such a good job
happens. But then he starts doing, I look at it as like, Jimmy's a creative guy.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with him being kind of a con man from before. But his way of trying to get around, like, for example, they had the moment where the lawyers for the Sandpiper residents were like, you can't come in. You can't have access to these records. You can't talk to these people. We can't allow it. And then he just finds a way around it.
Right.
He does that thing where he sort of hijacks that bus, in his best way he can, and he just talks to these people and he's genuine with them.
Well, and old people love him.
Yeah,
we've established this so many times.
Yeah, he just has this affinity for the old people, and he has a patience and he listens to them. And I bet they're in this position where they just feel like nobody's talking to me.
And I think that's the big thing. He has a patience for them.
Yeah,
and he seems. He listens so well to them. And, with old people, I think people just ignore them or pass them off or don't really engage with them to the point where they feel like they're being listened, where I think Jimmy makes them feel like they're the only person in the room. And it's, and even I know when someone gives you that type of attention, when they look at you and they're paying attention to words that you're saying and they make you feel like you're the only person that is interesting to them at that moment, it's a fantastic feeling.
Oh, God, yeah. Totally.
And I think that's one reason Jimmy has such a charm about him.
Oh, sure, because he has a way of making someone who is insignificant or feels insignificant to feel like they have some significance, if you will. It's just, he's just really great at it. And whether or not he's genuine in any of his feelings for these older people, it doesn't matter, because that's his con man persona, his salesman persona coming through, where he may not deep down enjoy spending all of his time with these older people. This means to an end. And so here he is. He came up with this great idea, and it was so creative. And he got everything that he needed, and he brings it to the law firm. And Chuck's like, I'm not sure I approve the way you got all of this. Yeah. And I'm not sure about the legality and da-da-da.
Oh, Chuck. They do a really great job this season of going back and forth between you hating Chuck and then feeling bad for Chuck.
Yeah.
And
putting you
empathy
in moments.
Yeah, putting you in Chuck's shoes where you feel empathetic towards him, and then Chuck does something and you're like, you're such a dick.
Yeah,
like, stop it.
Yeah, we were talking before we started to record about how one of the things I thought that they did so wonderfully this season was there's a couple of things that Chuck and Jimmy have problems over. Most of them are Chuck related in terms of like it's Chuck's feelings. It's
Chuck is jealous,
Chuck feeling
mostly.
jealous of a couple of different relationships that Jimmy has, and one of them their mother, and a couple of other things here, and he just can't let that go, and it's just like that feeling that siblings or relatives have when someone prefers someone over another,
right,
or someone shows interest in a person that you think is not worth your time and energy and all this other stuff. Those are such real and such like, I mean, I don't want to call them common, but they really are kind of common, these emotions.
Everyday feelings.
Yeah, and everybody can really relate. They're very relatable.
Yeah.
And, I would come in after we'd watched an episode the next day, and I'm like, it's just something as simple and small. You don't even have to write this great drama of these crazy things that happen. It's such a relatable thing. So many people watched, the scene where, is the flashback where they were in the hospital with the mom, and Chuck and Jimmy went to go visit they're in the hospital. Their mom is clearly on her deathbed.
Yeah.
And Jimmy finally, he cares so much about Chuck. He just blindly cares so much about Chuck. And he's like, we haven't eaten in a few days. We got to do something. We got to have something to eat. And Chuck's like, I'm not going anywhere.
He just refuses to leave.
I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving. And Jimmy's like, well, I'll take care of you. I'm going to go, I'll go get something to eat for the both of us.
Right.
And as soon as Jimmy leaves, their mom wakes up and she only asks for Jimmy.
Twice.
And as soon as oh God, right through it's like a stake.
And Chuck
right
makes himself known too. And she's
like, no, it's Chuck. And she's like, Jimmy.
Yeah.
And then she dies. And then you feel that moment of empathy for Chuck, just like you were saying. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh, that's got to be the worst.
Right.
We've all had that moment where we've had a parent or a family member without meaning to. It just happened, and there's a moment where there's like a preference that's given. So you have that quick moment of empathy where you're like, oh, I've been there. I know how Chuck feels right now. And then Jimmy comes back, and he's got these sandwiches, and he's like, goes into the room, and nobody's there, and oh my God, Chuck, what's going on? And he's immediately concerned, and he's like, did she wake up? And he's like,
yeah, did she wake up? Did she say
no.
anything?
And he's like, no.
And then you're like, dick.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that they did such a good job of painting Chuck into this way that like you have this moment, really toys with you. You have this moment where you're like, you empathize with him so greatly. It's just, there's this pain and like I said, a relatable moment where you're like, oh, I've been there, or I know someone who's been there. And then immediately, like right after, like, oh, God damn, fuck you. Like, how can you do that to your brother? And of course, anytime that, if you notice throughout the season, anytime where Chuck does something that makes you go, fuck you, what a dick. Like, how does Jimmy not see it or whatever?
Jimmy then immediately does something.
Jimmy is either in the midst of doing something for Chuck, something nice, or he does something nice for him directly after to sort of like juxtapose that moment. And it's amazing how like Jimmy totally blindly.
He tries so hard to make his brother proud, and Chuck will never be proud of Jimmy.
Yeah.
He's so scorned and jealous. And like in the last season, when we finally found out that it's all this time, all these years, it's been Chuck telling what's his face
at HHM,
at
Harold, yeah,
that to not promote him, to not do anything with him, even after Jimmy got his law degree and everything. It was Chuck who
held him back.
No.
Yep.
And as hurt as Jimmy was by that, he's still there for Chuck when he passes out or ends up in the hospital again or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, how many times were you yelling at the screen where it's like, don't do this, don't do that, and like the scene where he knocks himself out in the second to last episode there, when he knocks himself out at the copy center, and you see Jimmy and he jumps forward and then jumps back into the dark, and you can see that he's like literally like
he's fighting with himself,
fighting so physically hard to go and jump in and help out, and you're yelling at the TV and you're like, don't do it. Don't do it, because we know all of the behaviors leading up to it, that there's nothing that Jimmy can do in this moment that Chuck will then he'll
Change
never
his
see.
mind.
He'll never change his mind.
No.
There's nothing. It's literally it's a battle he's never going to win.
No.
Jimmy's
And
never going to win that battle. And we can see it, but he can't.
Right. And isn't it interesting, though, that the two of them are completely polar opposites on that? Chuck hates Jimmy with such a passion. Like, he hates the guy. I don't even think there is a brotherly love for Jimmy anymore inside of Chuck. He is just so hurt. And then Jimmy, as many times as Chuck hurts him and upsets him and does all these cruel things to him, is still there whenever his brother needs anything.
Isn't that
still
crazy?
Caring and loving towards him when he can't, like, it's just, it kills me.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many times this season that I was yelling at Jimmy, just stop, just leave, just walk away.
I know, and he can't. And weren't there were a couple of different times where he would show up at Chuck's house and he'd he'd sort of pace a little bit, and you're like, you're yelling, you're like, don't go in there, don't go in there, don't go in there. And then he takes his stuff and throws it into the mailbox and then goes inside and you're like, son of a bitch.
Yep.
He just does. And again, though, kind of like in all of his other life things, Jimmy just won't learn. He can't learn. It's almost like he can't see that Chuck has these poor feelings towards him.
Well, and part of you can kind of understand Chuck's irritation towards Jimmy. He doesn't follow the straight and narrow like Chuck does.
Right.
Chuck has done everything the right way. And it got him very far. Very far. And Jimmy tries to take shortcuts to get to where Chuck is, and Chuck doesn't appreciate that.
Of course not.
And, like, for example, although Jimmy always has good intentions behind what he does, he's a creative guy and he likes to find other ways around things. So there's the instance where he tries to bribe the lady at the desk with the Beanie Baby.
Yeah.
And the girl calls him out, like, that's bribing an official. Like, you can't.
Right.
You
That's
can't
against the
do
rules.
that.
You can't do that.
Right.
Right.
Just things like that. Or falsifying evidence.
Yeah.
So Price, the guy with the freaking flashy ass Hummer.
I know. And could we have more scenes of, like, Mike's, like, roll his eyes reaction to all these? I know, his eye rolls are unbelievable. I mean, you thought they were good in Breaking Bad, but in Better Call Saul, they're just like, because he literally is just like, it's his whole body eye rolls. He's like,
I know.
What is like the stupidity of people? So
Price has gotten it in his head that he's hot shit and he doesn't need Mike anymore. Fires Mike, and starts going on these drug deals with
these
Mike.
drop-offs with Nacho. Yeah.
Nacho notices that Mike's no longer there, takes that time to, takes advantage of that to find a little bit more out about Price.
Yep.
Ends up burglarizing him, taking a bunch of money and cards. He doesn't give a shit about the money. He cares about his cards.
Yeah.
In the process, he dumbass calls the cops. Like, he would be one of those guys that showed up on, like, the world's dumbest criminals.
Yeah, he's like the guy that, like, the stuff you hear about with a person, like, robbed something in the middle of the snow and they caught them because they followed his footprints.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Stuff like that.
Yeah, he'd be that guy.
So Mike ends up so the cops come, they find the secret compartment behind his couch.
Of course they do.
They're piecing things together because this guy's an idiot. And Mike gets Nacho to drop, to give him his cards back and everything. He threatens that he's going to tell Tuco about his activities.
His side deals.
Side deals.
Nacho's got all this side work going on.
So Price has to trade him his flashy-ass Hummer and $10,000 for his baseball cards, which I don't even think he cared about losing his Hummer. He just wanted his cards. Those were important to him.
Yeah.
And then they need to get the cops off of him, so they bring Jimmy in, and Jimmy makes up this ridiculous story about how that cubby was for his fetish videos that he makes. And they are of him sitting on pies and crying.
Yeah.
It was like, where do you come up with this shit, Jimmy?
Right. And he literally, the thing is that he always takes it that step further. Like Jimmy probably could have gotten away with that as just a story, but he knows that having that actual tape,
it seals the deal.
It seals the deal. So he has that copy with him, shows it to the cops, but then later he tells Kim about it.
Yeah.
And Kim's like,
he's so excited.
Yeah, it's like, wait till I tell you this funny story. Right.
Left over.
And in his eyes, he probably looks at like doing something fun and funny like this is on the same level as, that guy that we conned, we just got some free drinks. This is the same thing, right? But it's not. And especially, and Kim knows the difference. I mean, I'm sure if Kim got caught with the whole like, they con the guy out of the drinks, whatever. But this moment, this directly affects a legal thing.
Right.
And it was a legal thing. It's on paper. It's on a police report somewhere.
Right.
And she just immediately is like,
shuts him down.
You falsified evidence. That's a felony.
Right.
Like and he can't understand. Like he's still kind of like a little boy in ways. Yeah. Whereas like he just did this funny thing and he wanted to tell his girlfriend about it. Right. And she was just like, oh my God, you can't do that. You can't, I mean, that's a felony. Oh my God.
Right.
So that was hilarious. There was also some really great, I mean, we talked about him in the beginning, but we've been talking a lot about Jimmy, but so much really great like background and some present day stuff on Mike. I mean, we did get a little bit of the background in season 1 on why he's even where he is because of his son and, the mother of his granddaughter is there and they've got all this and, they live in this area. So he wanted to take care of them and he's doing that. He's sort of helping take care of them. But then he starts wanting to help further. He wants to help her get a house in a nicer neighborhood and all this other stuff.
She kind of...
I wonder... Yeah, so that whole scene, like, there's that whole...
She freaks out and says that there's gunshots and that they're living in a bad neighborhood and she needs to get out of there.
Yeah.
So Mike, without her knowing, does a surveillance of the house overnight. No gunshots. Then he's at work. He gets a phone call. There was 3 gunshots that night and now there's a bullet hole in her siding. And
there is like a mark there from something.
But who knows?
Like did she throw a rock or something?
She could have created it. It could have been there for a while. Who knows?
Right.
And then Mike just goes along with it. Doesn't tell her I surveyed your house last night and nothing happened. And it makes you wonder, right? One, it makes you wonder, is she honestly that paranoid about the neighborhood, or does she know
that Mike will give her kind of everything she wants?
Right, because of his granddaughter.
Right.
And then for Mike, too, why didn't he bother? Is it just because he doesn't really care as long as it calms her down and his granddaughter is safe? Like, so their relationship is very interesting on how they don't – it's not like they don't get along, but – they're just very weird with each other.
Well, and it's
a fresh relationship.
Exactly.
Right.
And I don't believe his son was married to her. This is just he had a girlfriend and a daughter, I think.
Okay.
I don't think they were ever really I can't remember. I'd have to look that up.
Either.
But if they were married, they weren't married for very long, if that's the case. But so their relationship is very like they only have one thing in common, and that's the granddaughter.
Right.
So, they sort of float around that and,
and fun fact, she was in an episode of Walking Dead, right?
No.
What? You didn't?
Wait, who? The granddaughter?
No. The baby
granddaughter, baby mama.
Yeah.
What episode was she in? I didn't know this.
She's in the episode when Rick's going crazy and he's outside the walls of the prison. She was the really dirty woman who had the accent.
Oh, you did tell me this.
And her husband, she had her husband's head.
That's right. And she had the dead baby.
And she needed to get food for him because he was hungry.
Oh, my God. That's right.
Yeah.
Because she had that heavy accent. That's why you couldn't tell.
Yep.
That's right.
Yeah.
You did tell me that.
That was her.
I forgot all about
fun
that.
Fact.
Look at that. Fun fact. Little fun fact. So we get all this great stuff about Mike. And then so he obviously wants to help his granddaughter live in a safer place, regardless of whether or not he thinks his daughter-in-law esque person is whether she's a little crazy or not crazy. He doesn't know, but it's most important that he keeps his granddaughter safe. So he needs money. So to do that, he needs to look for like
he goes to
bigger
his vet
jobs.
friend.
Yeah, he goes to his veterinarian friend because it's funny because I of course put my own vet in there to think about if my vet had some sort of like side business or whatever, and he's got such like 70s decor at his office, so I was like, I cannot imagine him being like a front for like giving out mob style hits and jobs. So Mike is telling this guy that he needs to make some more
jobs.
Needs bigger jobs, but this guy tells him, but bigger jobs involve things you don't want to do.
Right.
And come to find out, Mike has some rules. He doesn't want to kill anyone.
And Mike tells him too, you let me worry about what I don't want to do.
Yeah.
Just tell me what jobs you have.
Yeah. So
it sounds like he's willing to maybe break some of his own rules to get this money.
So then Nacho comes to him and is like, listen, I need to keep my stuff from my uncle safe. He can't know. His uncle is Tuco, and we already know from Breaking Bad that Tuco is already crazy.
Cray.
He cray. And Nacho makes the point too that this is when he started using the drugs that he's dealing. So
and that people have already died because of his paranoia with his gun.
I think he's using
drugs.
Cocaine now, but then it becomes he's using the blue meth later.
Yes.
So Tuco crazy. Tuco be crazy. So Nacho was like, listen, I'm doing this stuff on the side. If Tuco finds out, he's going to kill me. So my choice is I have to take him out. He's got to be taken out and he makes the point too that Tuco is acting crazy. He's acting a fool. So it behooves the Salamanca clan that Tuco be taken out because he's a detriment to them anyway. Eventually, something's going to happen.
And he's just about anybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Right now.
So he sets this up with Mike, and Mike says no because he's not going to kill anyone. He doesn't want to do a hit.
Well, he goes to it first. He goes and he visits his gun dealer and looks at a gun, and then decides he's not going to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Wipes down the gun and everything.
And it's the gun dealer we do see later who helps out Walt get his gun too. Yep. So I love. The Wikipedia page, which I printed out, has some really great, like they show a lot of, we're going to get some obvious Breaking Bad recurrence.
Oh, yeah.
With Tuco, with Hector.
The twins.
The twins. I would assume we're eventually going to get some Gus action and some other people.
I can't wait for Gus.
I know, it's going to be great.
Oh, my God.
But they're also doing a really great job of throwing some, like, little Easter egg people in there. And some of them are small, like, the stockbroker guy does show up as a person in an episode for Breaking Bad at some point, which is great because if you think about it, in a city, would you run into the same people occasionally here and there? If you're in the same parts of the city, yeah, sure. So there's some tiny people which you would have to really dig to find it, and thank you, Internet, for doing that for us. So there's some people you'd have to dig, but then there's some other ones that it's like, the gun dealer guy.
Right.
Actor's name is Jim Beaver. He's great. He was on Deadwood. Love him. We could do a whole podcast about Deadwood, let me tell you. But his character, it's not a big character, but you definitely recognize him from the Breaking Bad. So I love those little callbacks that they have that this is all the same world.
Right.
And it would make sense if they're in the same world, in this sort of prequel world, that we would see even some of the same sort of small characters. Which makes sense. But anyway, so he does reach out about getting the gun. Then he says no.
Yep, and then he goes back to Nacho.
Nacho and he says,
no, but I have another idea.
Yeah. And his other idea is to not kill him, but put him away. So they put together this whole elaborate thing where he starts a fight with Tuco, and Tuco, like, totally knocks him out. But he does it while he's got a gun on him. So when the cops show up, because, of course, Mike did the pre-call saying there's a disturbance going on. So when the cops show up, here's Tuco in the midst of an assault with a gun on him, and that makes it a gun charge, which leads to some more other
5
things,
to 10
too.
years in prison.
Exactly.
Right. Gotta say, Mike can take one hell of a beating.
Fuck yeah, man. When he was getting the beat down and then afterwards, and Nacho's like, why did you do it this way? And he really didn't say anything. I think that's, like, some of the mystery that I think is going to be great to sort of dive into is Mike just has this sort of code about him.
He has a moral about him that is maybe not for everybody, but it's for him, and that's what he lives by.
And I love how smart he is.
So smart.
He thinks of some of the craziest things, like the little things, like when he knew that Hector's people were going to come for him, and he did the thing with the mat out front so he'd know that somebody was in the house.
That.
Totally knew someone was in there, and it was in such an easy way. Like
and he knew two were in there because there was two set of footsteps.
Yeah. And he, scoped out the whole place, and then he literally
turns on the TV and then waits.
And they come out, and he just gives them the beat down.
Yeah.
But I compared it a little bit with if our listeners have ever watched, I would highly recommend at least the first 3 or 4 seasons of Burn Notice, which is just such a great show.
So stupid but awesome at the same time.
Yeah. Half-hour comedy. Was it half hour?
No, I think it was an hour.
Great show. But picture, if you will, somebody with the same kind of snarky but smart approach to living this sort of mob style life or whatever, and make him just a lot younger. And that's a lot of the things that I loved about Burn Notice was there'd just be these moments where the main character, Michael Weston, he'd just
Donovan was
fantastic.
Awesome.
He'd just literally he'd be jumping out of a window. He'd figure out a way to use.
There was MacGyver, but better.
Yeah. There was this one episode, I always think of this. There was one episode where he was trying to get out of a place that was on the 3rd floor, but the place had Venetian blinds on the window. And he literally grabs part of it, breaks open the window, and goes to jump, and then there's a pause on the screen, the image freezes, and then you always would get his voiceover, and he'd be like, "Now, kids, if you're stuck on a 3rd floor," he wouldn't say kids, he'd be like, "Now, if you're find yourself stuck on a 3rd floor and you got to get out quick, use a set of Venetian blinds because it'll pull down really, whatever, and it'll help break your fall." I mean, he would describe stuff to the T, and it's it would all work. So it's it was these these real world instances where, I mean, it's not like I'm going to jump out of a 3rd floor window, but you know what I mean? He'd find a way to sort of apply practical knowledge to the spy world that he was in. And I feel if you were to take him and just make him a lot older and make him not as talkative, that would be Mike.
Make him a bit grumpy.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go back and watch some Burn Notice. I miss that show.
It's really a great find. It starts to sort of run off the rails once it gets towards the end.
Yeah, the last couple of seasons were a little weird, but the first couple are really good.
I mean, and anytime you can get Bruce Campbell in a show.
Bruce Campbell, Jeffrey Donovan. What more can you ask
I know,
for?
fantastic. Anyway, we digress.
The man, the myth.
I know, the legend. So, anyway, there's a couple of other things we'd love to get to as well. There was these... the flashbacks that we saw were probably some of the most...
Well, so Jimmy releases that commercial, and it pisses his boss off, which then pisses what's-his-face over at HHM off, which then shits on Kim.
Yeah.
So poor Kim is now sitting in the
down in the library. She's in the...
She's
doing document review, which is what the most... first year lawyers do.
And Chuck comes and have a conversation. So she gets Mesa Verde, big thing, but why can't I think of his name? Her boss at HHM.
It's Harold, isn't it?
Is it?
I don't remember.
That doesn't sound right. Where is it?
Howard.
There
it is, right
yes.
there. Thank you.
So Howard still isn't giving her the time of day. She's not running point on Mesa Verde or anything like that. Still shitting on her. So then Chuck's there, and they have a conversation, and Chuck gives her this information about how back in the day his father had this small convenience store, and then Jimmy starts skimming money off the top and embezzling from him, and it eventually was the demise of his father's convenience store, which was then eventually the demise of his father.
Yeah.
Because that's what his father lived for.
Yep.
And when he's telling Kim the story, because you don't really trust much that comes out of Chuck's mouth when it comes to Jimmy.
Because he just so blindly doesn't like Jimmy, and you don't know why.
Right.
Yeah.
That he's telling the story, and you don't fully believe him. You think that maybe Jimmy maybe stole money a couple of times, but not so much, right?
Yeah.
And then we end up getting this flashback a couple of episodes later where we see this guy walk into the store and tell Jimmy's father that his he needed gas money, right? He needed to get to his family or whatever.
Yeah, it was a pretty easy grift where he's like,
people have used it a million times, I'm sure.
Yeah, I
I've
just
heard
need a
it
couple
few
bucks to
too.
get some gas, and if you can spare a few dollars, that'd be great.
Right.
Yeah.
And Jimmy calls him out on it right away that it's a scam, and his father doesn't want to hear anything
because
because
he wants to think the best of people.
He wants to think the best of people and help this guy out because you don't know, he could be in a bind. So his father does for this guy, and then once he's walks away, he tells Jimmy, "You're right, I'm totally scamming you," and blah, blah, blah. And then Jimmy ends up doing it too to his own father.
Yep.
So that was really interesting to see that Chuck wasn't lying.
Yeah.
And again, it gives Chuck kind of this reason to be irritated with Jimmy. You know, like, that you stole from your own family.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a really great sort of setup too for all of this time. Chuck's had this sort of like irrational dislike for Jimmy, and you knew it was there. And then he says that thing to Kim, and I was the same. I didn't believe it. I was like, he's never had any evidence that, Jimmy's this great lawyer. He doesn't follow the rules all the time, but who does? And blah, blah, blah. And then so for him to say that to Kim, and I just didn't believe it, and then to have the evidence of it, you're like, well, I mean, I saw Jimmy's side of it because here he was just trying so hard to show his dad what was the right thing to do, and his dad wouldn't listen to him.
Right.
So,
but at the same time, there's certain roads you don't cross.
Right.
Right.
Of course.
You don't steal from family. It's just that's something you shouldn't do.
So he broke some moral rules there.
Right.
And there's a couple more that really, really drill into the Chuck and the Jimmy relationship. We talked already about the scene with the mom at the hospital, but there was another really great scene where they flash back to Chuck and his wife, who is no longer around, but they've never really described why she's not there.
No, we don't know if she passed away or if she left him. We have no idea what's going on with her.
So they're getting ready for dinner, and they have this really like cultured life.
It's beautiful, and the cooking and the music.
Yeah, it's very. You get this sense of like culture and. Highbrow and, nose in the air slightly. Yeah. And Jimmy is coming to dinner, and Chuck gives his wife, Rebecca.
Sounds like she has never met him before.
Right.
And giving her all these almost pointers and disclaimers almost.
Yeah, exactly. Like don't get drawn in by him.
Right.
He's charming, and he tries to charm people, and he's a loser and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And he even goes so far as to set up like a whole like, hey, if I pull my ear, that
means we can wrap that up.
Right. And then flash forward to they're having dinner, and Jimmy is, of course, his usual charming self. He's adorable.
She's just having a ball.
She is loving him. Mm-hmm. And Chuck starts to like tug on his ear, and she doesn't see it. She ignores him entirely. Yep. So here we've got these things set up where like Chuck has a reason for disliking Jimmy for the things that he did to the dad, but he also has these other like emotional things with, here's his wife who finds Jimmy funny. Like later on, they're in bed and they're, going to sleep, and she's like, "Oh, I thought he was pleasant. We can have him over again."
Yeah.
And he was hoping to have like an ally in his war against Jimmy.
Exactly.
And she wasn't.
Nope.
And so you've got that, and then you've got Chuck, who did everything right in life, and in the final moments, his mom asked for his brother, who's nothing but a loser, and has done nothing but bad things. And he just cannot understand that because Chuck's done nothing but be the best of a person. So, you still like you get a little bit of empathy because you see where his emotions are coming from, So
then Jimmy ends up getting himself fired from Davis and Maine by wearing obnoxiously colored suits and playing bagpipes in his office and not flushing when he takes a shit.
Yeah, I thought it was fucking hilarious. I mean,
that cracked me up so bad.
And I love how I just played dumb where he's like, where what's his face from
save water, and then he's like, but they're low flushing or whatever.
Yeah, they're low flushing toilets. He's like, I didn't know
I
that.
didn't know that.
I didn't. Good to know. And then when when they eventually bring him in to fire him, they're like, obviously you're
trying to get fired.
You're trying to get fired because there was a loophole in his contract. He couldn't, if he quit, he would have had to give back the signing bonus that he got.
Yep.
So he found the loophole is that he'd have to be fired without cause.
Cliff was so irritated by that point. He's like, just go. Take it. I don't give a shit.
He's like, get the fuck out of here.
And he's like, I'll pay you back for the desk. And he's like, take the desk. I don't. Just get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, no kidding.
So he is on his own, and Kim is, at the moment, struggling between HHM and...
Swikert,
yes.
Yeah, she gets an offer from another firm. Yeah.
Right. And she just doesn't know what to do. She feels like she owes such a debt to HHM because they put her through law school. You know, she owes them. So it's hard for her to want to leave. Plus, you have to think, are these people just trying to get her out of there because they see her as a threat?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So Jimmy goes to her and says, let's start our own practice.
Yeah.
We can be partners. And then she ends up countering with, let's not be counters, let's be two separate lawyers, but we work in the same office and we support each other.
So we can support each other, but we're not the same.
Right.
Because I think
she doesn't want that name on her.
And she initially asked him, she said, you'd have to go the straight and narrow.
Right.
And I don't think he can.
No.
He can't be a lawyer like they are.
Right.
He's got to be able to have the freedom to be himself. He's got to be able to be Jimmy.
And I think she cares very deeply for him, but there's something when it comes to the law, she just can't do that with it.
Yeah, she has too much of a respect for it.
Right. So before she had left HHM, she had got Mesa Verde,
the big client.
Huge client. So when she ends up going to her own practice, her and Howard end up racing to get Mesa.
Yeah.
And she ends up winning them right away. And Chuck's not going to have that.
Of course
so
not.
So Chuck puts on
Chuck.
all the bells and whistles, actually goes into HHM with all the lights on, and convinces them. Because we're a bigger law firm and we can give your account, the big account that you have, such great attention and blah, 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 and steals them right from Kim.
Yeah.
Dick move.
Yeah, total dick move.
Very dick move.
Yeah.
This completely pisses Jimmy off, who then his brother, after doing everything, is completely out of it.
Yeah, he's like catatonic almost on the couch.
He takes some of the Mesa files, brings them to All Night Copy Center, and
does his best,
makes his copies and cuts them out and changes. He just flips the address.
Yeah,
simple.
Yeah, it was
flips
sweet.
The address.
He did such a good job that right now I can't tell you which one's the right one.
I know
it was like 1261 and 1216. Rich is saying it's 61. Rich, number one producer, is saying it's 61. So we're gonna go with him. So yeah, within that episode, they went back and forth so many times. I was like, I don't know which one is the fucking right one. I don't know. So he did a good job.
Yeah, they're in court, and because of the discrepancy, they are now pushed back a couple of months.
Yeah,
Mesa's pushed back couple of months, and this causes them to drop HHM and go to Kim.
Yeah,
and this doesn't sit well with Chuck. Chuck goes literally insane trying to figure this out.
He's convinced that there's no way that this could have happened. He knows, and even though it's the business is awarded to Kim, he knows that Jimmy is behind it. He just can't conceive of making that kind of a mistake.
So he gets Jimmy and Kim over there and tells Kim his whole superstition about everything, what's going on, his conspiracy about it. And Kim stands up for Jimmy and just leaves it at that.
And she tells Chuck, too, that she thinks that he's sad, too. She thinks it's sad that he would think those things.
Right.
And,
But then as they leave, she punches him. And
so it's obvious that she believes part of what's going on.
And I don't know if Kim fully believed Chuck's entire story, but I think that there are moments in the story where there are things that Jimmy could and would do, especially for Kim.
Yeah.
Especially for Kim.
Yeah.
And she knows that. And she just, I think in that moment, doesn't know who to believe, but she stuck up for Jimmy because Chuck's a dick.
Yeah.
And that's what she's going to go with. So she decides, we're never going to talk about this, but as they're laying in bed that night, tells him, if you did do anything,
cover your tracks.
Make sure all loose ends are tied up.
Yeah.
So Jimmy hops right out of bed.
And he's like, hang on, I gotta go see a guy about a thing. See ya.
So, but when he gets there, Chuck's already inside the copy place. And then they leave. Well, it's not Chuck. It's the Ernesto.
Yeah.
Ernesto's in the copy place asking the guy some questions. Then he leaves. So then Jimmy rushes in, buys the guy's silence.
Yeah, it was pretty easy.
Leaves. The guy only wanted to make sure that it wasn't anything illegal he was doing.
Right.
And otherwise, he didn't really care.
Yeah.
So Jimmy walks out. Ernesto comes back with Chuck. Chuck's in there with all the lights on with his...
And he's literally like physically freaking out.
Yeah, completely
he's like mentally
freaking
and
out.
He's physically freaking out. He's like, you're lying. You can't,
Well, it doesn't help that this guy just told Ernesto that, yeah, I think he was here. And then Chuck comes back in to get the full story and ask more questions about it. And now this guy's like, sorry, dude, it may have been that night, may have been another night. I don't really know.
And I love how Jimmy preset the moment up when he paid him off. He was also like, this guy is going to try and tell you that, he's got the law on his side and he has the right. And da-da-da-da. And he set it up so that this guy wouldn't crumble. And Chuck went there exactly where Jimmy knew he was going to go and try and manipulate the situation.
Right.
Mr. I'm a much better and more legal lawyer than you are, tried to manipulate that situation. And the guy was ready. He was like, nope, he might have. I thought there might have been someone who looked like him, but I was mistaken.
But now I don't remember.
I don't remember clearly.
So Chuck gets so frazzled, he ends up passing out and he severely hits his head on the corner of the counter.
Yeah.
Jimmy, watching from the side, is torn between going in and helping his brother or just letting what happens happen.
Yeah.
And he's talking, he's like, call 911, because no one's doing what they should be doing.
Yeah, they're all sort of standing around waiting to see what to do.
So Jimmy rushes in, calls 911, they get Chuck to the hospital. Chuck has to go through a bunch of these tests that he doesn't want to go through because they all have massive amounts of electricity.
Yeah, an MRI and a CAT scan.
So Jimmy takes the guardianship or whatever of him to make these decisions because he's not in his right mind to make those decisions, and then he's pissed off and then goes home. Yeah. So then Jimmy gets a phone call from Howard, says that Chuck has quit HHM.
Oh, pre that, you have to also throw in just a tiny tidbit where Chuck's like, I know you did it.
Ernesto.
How'd you get there so fast? How'd you get to the copy center so fast? And Jimmy was like, he had no answer.
He didn't
had
have an
no
answer.
Excuse. He didn't think
caught.
of it. And then Ernesto was like, I called him. And it's a lie. And he asked him later. And it was so cute. He's like, why'd you lie? He's like, you're brothers.
My friend.
And he made such a great point. He's like, you guys are brothers. Like, he could see from the outskirts, like, all of this bullshit going on, and these guys are brothers. And he was like, and you're my friend,
Because they were friends back in the mailroom,
he walks away and he says underneath his breath, he's like, man, I miss the mailroom. Poor guy. So he says that he quit.
Yeah. So Jimmy rushes over right away because for some reason he just can't let Chuck quit law. He just can't do it. He can't let him do it.
I don't understand.
And he finally, so he's knocking on the door and Chuck changed the keys and everything, won't let him in. And he's like begging. So Chuck finally lets him in and he's got oh my god.
he used to just have those heat
foil
blankets, the foil blankets over himself, and now he's started to attach them to the walls
all over the
place because he's like, the walls aren't working, it's not keeping out the electromagnetic blah blah blah, and
So, and I know it's all a fucking ploy to get him to confess. Because if he thinks that his brother's quitting law and actually going insane, because he says, if I my mind must be going, the electricity must be getting to my mind because I made such a simple mistake.
Yeah.
And Jimmy's trying, like, anyone can make such a simple mistake. It was stupid. It was small, not a big deal. That shouldn't cause you to quit law. Nope, Chuck's not having it because he's never made a mistake in his life. So finally Jimmy caves and admits to everything.
Yeah.
And he does it kind of in a way of like, sure, Chuck, I'll tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah, he does it in a way where he could back out later.
Right.
He's basically like, fine, I did it. Will that make you happy?
Right.
Will you go back to doing law now?
Right. And then he ends up leaving and Chuck reveals his tape recorder. Like, I knew he We knew it.
Yeah,
we knew it was
and
gonna
that was it. That was the last moment,
Yep.
the last
So
last little moment there.
I'm hoping for next season
Yep.
that we see a Kim backstory.
Yes,
Because I'd like more information on Kim.
yes, definitely.
Really, I mean that she's my most wanted. I want to learn more about her. Obviously, we're going to see what happens with Mike. Kind of got left as a cliffhanger too. Mike goes to kill Hector, and someone stops him from doing so.
Yeah, they leave a sign that's like, don't do it on his car. And, internet chatter is saying, ooh, it might be Gus. And it could be somebody else. It's hard to say. But otherwise, seeing who that person is will be definitely something we want to see in the next season.
It may be too early for Gus, but I'd like to see him soon because that would just be interesting.
Yeah, be interesting to see if it took a long time for him to build up the dynasty or if it was basically just like a smash and grab.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I'd like to get more information maybe on what happened with Chuck's wife.
Yeah.
And then see what's going to happen with Chuck because Chuck was nowhere in Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
He didn't even mention Chuck.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see how the rest of that plays out.
Yeah. No Kim and no Chuck in Breaking Bad. So the switch over to when he becomes Saul has got to be, it's got to be something large.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not sure we're there yet, but it's baby steps toward that.
Yeah.
I want to see all of those things as well.
Yeah. But I think in total, great season.
Yeah.
I thought it was good. I'm excited. I mean, I think we have to wait until February until
I
season
know.
3.
They were renewed for another season,
renewed.
and it was pretty quickly right after.
Yeah.
And one would think if they were able to keep the ratings that they had this season, should be able to keep going for another couple of years. So.
Yeah. So that is our Better Call Saul.
That's our bonus episode.
That's our bonus episode.
Our first of a few.
Yep.
We're in the middle of a hiatus right now for Fear.
Fear the Walking Dead's going to be on hiatus until August 21st. So we got quite a few weeks that we're going to be just kind of chatting about different things. We are in the process of getting kind of a calendar together, and when we have a better idea of what episodes we'll be releasing, we will let you know. But you can definitely expect some Walking Dead episodes. We're thinking about doing a little mini series talking about the last season of Walking Dead, maybe do a comparison between the comics and the show and some stuff like that. So keep a lookout for that. We'll definitely be active on our Facebook and stuff like that.
Absolutely. And if you've got questions for those future episodes, you can email us at aimfortheheadpodcast@gmail.com. As always, find us on our Facebook page, Aim for the Head Podcast. Just do a search there. You can also follow our funny pictures on Instagram. Just do a search for Aim for the Head Podcast, all one word. And we're also on Twitter. So find us at AFTH Podcast. And if you've got any questions or comments or anything, just put the hashtag in, #AFTH. And that's all for today. I'm Diana.
And I'm Julie.
Thanks for listening.
And I'm Rich.